This is episode 266 of Mitolife Radio. I'm Matt Blackburn, and today we're interviewing Jeff Hoyt of Zeolite Labs. I was actually introduced to this product by one of my guests, Matt Kaufman, that I had on recently, and I got on it and I've been loving it. And I'm really curious to retest my hair and see if I have a reduction in metals, because my last hair tissue mineral analysis test showed that I was dumping pretty much every metal. So I've been taking the ZeoCharge zeolite product for several weeks now, and I'm feeling great. I really appreciate how much education he puts out there about his product. And I'm the same way with all of the Mitolife products. It's really heavy on the information side. And we do our best to simplify the information, but there's a segment of people that love a ton of detail. And so we really dive into that. And I really appreciate that Jeff does that as well. In this interview, Jeff breaks down a lot of myths about zeolite. First, he describes what it is, the difference between natural and synthetic zeolite, the different zeolite products on the market, powder, liquid, and nano, why he believes a low dose creates a less effective detox. He describes the 3 levels of detox theory, how zeolite differs from the push-catch protocols, why he doesn't think it's a good idea to get zeolite into the brain. He talks about his favorite form of testing called the oligoscan, what zeolite binds to besides heavy metals, goes into depth on dosage and timing of zeolite, when zeolite disrupts vitamin and mineral status and what to do about it, and a whole lot more. So enjoy the show. Here is Jeff Hoyt. All right, Jeff Hoyt, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Matt. Happy to be here.
Yeah, this will be fun talking about zeolite. I don't have too much experience with it, but over the last, 4 or 5 years, I've seen the MLM Nano zeolite make the rounds, and a lot of people that were promoting my brand Mitolife were also promoting the liquid zeolite in the nano form. And I started listening to your videos. I was introduced to you by Matt Kaufman, and just started listening to your lectures while I was eating dinner or whatever. And I was really impressed with just the amount of detail that you share on the science of zeolite. And my favorite one was where you break down the difference between your powder zeolite and then the liquid and then the nano. Thought that was really great.
Yeah, that's what I've been trying to do. Just put as much information and education out on zeolite, because it's one of the most powerful supplements on the market, but I really think it's one of the most misunderstood and misused. So that's really what I've been dedicating kind of my professional career to the last couple of years, is detox in general, but more specifically zeolite, and the proper zeolite used in the proper way so we can get the right results.
How did you get into zeolite and studying it?
Yeah, so I had some health challenges growing up. I was on a lot of antibiotics, had some issues really early on. And then we had this big God Heal Jeffrey party when I was, I think, 7. So I was kind of okay from 7 to the teenage years, and then had some shots, we'll call them. I don't know if we can, we'll say shots. I think people know what I'm talking about there. When I was 18 for a high school physical, and, things really kind of spiraled in a negative direction from there. And I had some issues before, looking back on it, like definitely some yeast overgrowth. I remember not being able to drive for more than 10 minutes in broad daylight when I was a teenager. I was on my way to get my license renewed when I was 17, fell asleep behind the wheel. So there's definitely, I had no idea what was going on at the time. I always felt drunk. I'm falling over, no balance, and, definitely some imbalance there, but I didn't really know. And then the shots definitely kind of triggered me, and there was a kind of a negative cascade. Then got into functional medicine a little bit. I moved to Hawaii. I was soaking up sunshine, and was introduced to the concept of functional medicine, started seeing a functional medicine practitioner, And he put me on a food sensitivity. He recommended a food sensitivity test, which I took. And it did help quite a bit to the point where I wrote a job proposal to that laboratory, built a website, hirejeff.com, and ended up going to work for that company. And then I was working with functional medicine doctors, kind of seeing different approaches, what was working well, wasn't. There was a lot of strengths with functional medicine. Now I know there's also some limitations as well. But from there, my grandmother was diagnosed with a late stage cancer, and she was given between 6 hours and 7 days to live. So, very late stage, very rare form. And she was in her 80s, kind of at peace with it, but she decided to fight. So we were praying for her, and she just made a decision like, let's go for it. And she was in the middle of nowhere, right? Living in the middle of nowhere in Iowa, a town of, I think, 112. And she's like, well, we know this guy who sells supplements. And then my grandpa chimes in. He's like, this guy's a con artist. And so he was their computer repairman. But on the side, he's selling all sorts of stuff. So we go and talk to this guy, totally off the grid, really interesting guy. I had no idea what he was talking about at the time, but now it kind of all makes sense. He's talking about nanotech. I mean, this is 10 years ago. He's talking about all this stuff. I'm like, all right. So he recommended a few supplements, and we put her on those. And that kind of sparked my interest in the supplement industry, because there was a particular aloe vera that he recommended, and this stuff was $600 for a bag of it. And I was like, well, why is this $600 when you could get the other stuff? And he's explaining the difference in quality and the manufacturing process, and the content of the active ingredient, ACE-man. And so I'm like, all right. So that kind of spurred me to look into the science of glycobiology, which is kind of the study of sugar, but really immune regulating polysaccharides. And that was very interesting. So I started my first company, Life Sciences, 8 years ago, based on that concept, kind of the science behind immune regulation. Because when you look at, like, what's the difference between a regular mushroom and a medicinal mushroom, right? It's the unique polysaccharides that make up the medicinal mushroom, and that's because they have unique properties. So very interesting stuff. Got into all of that and was doing that for a number of years. I still have that company, but then did some more functional medicine training, was actually coaching people, doing lab testing, that type of thing. Opened up a biohacking center in Iowa. This is pre-COVID, so very few people, knew what any of the stuff was. So it wasn't wildly successful, but I still thought it was pretty cool. Most of the stuff was for me, right? All the fun stuff. And then I got into zeolite. So I realized that there was something missing. So with the immune regulators, with some really top quality supplements, top quality technology, coaching, diet, lifestyle changes, EMF mitigation, all that, there was something missing. And that really led me to detox. So, and then the question is, okay, how do you effectively detox? Because there's so many protocols, there's so many, there's saunas, there's all sorts of stuff, but a lot of them to me were very limiting or limited in what they could do, and a lot of times too stressful on the body. So I got introduced to zeolite, and I said, okay, this stuff looks pretty cool. And I was first introduced actually to the liquid zeolite, and then I realized, okay, maybe there's something a little better. I then got introduced to the guy who founded the zeolite industry. So I met him and realized that, okay, there's a little bit more to this, kind of got some of the insider information. Then I came out with my first zeolite supplement about 4 years ago. And then from there, we were doing experiments and basically optimizing the particle size arrangement, all this stuff. And that has led me to where we're at now with Zeolite Labs, which is the next generation version of zeolite, ZeoCharge. So kind of took my experience with the other product, the other zeolite product I was selling, and just made it better. So that's kind of where I'm at. My philosophy with business is kind of just take what's out there and make it better. So I don't have to redo everything, but just just combine it to make it better, and then do things differently with the goal of getting results that haven't been seen before. So if I just follow what everyone else is doing, mainstream education, or even alternative mainstream, those type of things, they can take me so far, but I want to do things that no one else is doing to see if I can get even better results. So that's kind of my overall philosophy.
That's awesome. Well, yeah, I've been taking it. I was telling you before we hit record, about 20 grams a day, and I might increase it. And we'll definitely talk about dosage, because I think in the supplement world, there's a common idea of less is more, less is safer. I've done so much megadosing of different nutrients, and a lot of them short term. I mean, not for years, which is, I think, when you get into trouble, especially with like, say, fat soluble vitamins. But short term, like a month or two, I think it's a drop in the bucket, really. Um, but before we get into dosage, are we talking about a cage, and is it made of aluminum silicate? Is that?
Yeah, so I'll just briefly kind of go over what it is.
Yeah.
So zeolite, because it is very confusing. There's so much information, and zeolite is a class of mineral. So zeolites by definition are aluminosilicates. So they're made of aluminum and silica. So that's concern number one, because people say, well, if this stuff is made of aluminum and silica, why would you want to put it in your body? The key is that what I like to say is when you put anything in your body, what is the net effect, right? The total, after all the interactions, everything that happens, what is the end result? So when you put something like a good quality zeolite in your body, although it has metals, those metals are not depositing themselves. They're not bioavailable. They're passing through in a structure, trapping other toxic elements and leaving the body. So the net effect is you're actually reducing levels of toxic metals and other toxic elements. So that's one misconception, because there are a number of people who just say anything, shilajit or zeolite or anything from the earth, basically don't consume it because it has metals. Everything from the earth is going to have metals because the earth is made of metals, right? It doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad product. It's just how it's interacting. So zeolites in general, aluminosilicates, they're volcanic minerals, and they have a negative ionic charge. So they're attracted to positively charged elements, which makes it unique. So a lot of the positively charged, positive elements in our bodies are things like the heavy metals, the mycotoxins, ammonia, radioactive isotopes, various toxic elements. What makes zeolite unique to some of the other binders and chelators on the market, there's a number of things, but one is that it's a selective or a smart binder. So it's not just going and grabbing everything with the positive charge, because that's what most things do, and it just results in a stressful experience, and it can deplete nutrients. That's why you have to pulse on and off of it. Zeolite works by a swap mechanism. So naturally occurring, zeolite has electrolytes in its, and yes, it is a cage-like structure. So it kind of looks like a honeycomb cage, which is also unique because it has a stronger ability to trap things in there. So in this cage, naturally, you have calcium, magnesium, potassium, sodium, right? These electrolytes. And when the zeolite structure comes across a heavier element, like a heavy metal, it will trade what it has for what it prefers. So if the zeolite structure has the potassium in it that comes across mercury, it trades the potassium for the mercury. If it comes across another essential nutrient, it leaves it alone because it already has the mineral that it prefers. So that's why it's unique. It's very interesting. Now, one thing to consider is zeolite is a broad term, so you can't take the information that is being presented here and apply it to a lot of zeolite supplements. So you've got these different classifications of zeolite supplements as well. First thing to distinguish, is it natural or is it synthetic? Because now we have a number of synthetic and lab grown and fragmented and all these various things where we've taken the zeolite structure, broken it apart, and now you no longer really have zeolite, right? So that's another issue. That's not going to be a selective binder. There is potential for, aluminum accumulation in the body with those type of things. So what the information that's being presented here is for natural clinoptilolite zeolite. So clinoptilolite is the form of zeolite that was chosen to be used for human consumption for a few reasons, but there's a bunch of other naturally occurring forms of zeolite that are not going to be safe. So just because it's zeolite doesn't mean it's good. A lot of zeolites are going to be quite toxic to you. And so some of the information that you might find online that says, maybe zeolite is toxic, it's because it's not talking about clinoptilolite. That's what's proven to be safe. So that's very important to distinguish.
Hmm. Yeah, it's interesting. When I moved to the woods, more rural and the forest environment, you just tend to cut yourself more and get injuries and bleed. And I started carrying around zeolite capsules, and it was the natural clinoptilolite zeolite. And if I got an injury and I was outside of the house, I would just open a capsule on my skin, mix a little bit of water in it. And I learned that I think they use synthetic zeolite in the military as like a blood clotter. Is that right? That's what I was.
Yeah, there is an application. I think there's a patent or there's something. It's in some sort of quick clot, or it's something.
Yep.
Yeah.
I have that stuff too. Yeah. If I get shot or something, probably want to go for that. But yeah, that's fascinating about the natural versus synthetic. So the synthetic will just not selectively bind.
So with
Yeah.
the research, so a lot of people when they think they just think about zeolite and say it's made of aluminum, it's made of
Mm.
silicone, there's going to be some metals in the structure. Then they're not. You have to look at the big picture. So that's where you come up
Mm.
with these other things where they try to alter the structure. So some of the synthetics, and interestingly, all of the studies, the human studies in animal on clinoptilolite zeolite, none of them have showed any aluminum toxicity or aluminum accumulation. But there is at least one study showing that a synthetic zeolite has been shown to accumulate in organs in the body. So it's really the synthetic that you have to be careful. I mean, the body just doesn't know what to do with it. It's different. It's not a natural form. It's just a completely different ball game there. And then the lab grown is another one that's sold in the supplement form, and that's just another way to say synthetic.
Mm.
So some people talk about, well, we need to reduce the aluminum content of the zeolite so it has less aluminum. You can't do that because it's a structure. So if you break apart the structure, you no longer have this cage, which is the entire point. Now you have potentially these, maybe zeolite fragments or clinoptilolite fragments, whatever they're marketed at, but just different, right? It's
Mhm.
it's not. I personally would not put any of that stuff in my body, right? I'm more into the natural. What I like to do is take solutions from nature and supercharge them with science. And I think that's a good way to explain kind of what we've done with the zeolite is it's a naturally occurring mineral and we micronize it so it reduces the particle size, which we'll get into to optimize its effectiveness, but we're not actually altering the structure or trying to synthesize it to make it better because when we try to do that, we usually make it worse.
Yeah. Well, can we go into the different products? Because you kind of referred to them earlier. And I think in one of your YouTube videos, you talk about how liquid zeolite is basically just a powder mixed in water, which you have a limitation in dosing, right? Unless you want to pay for a lot of liquid to ship around, which is more expensive. Could you go into that and then as also the nano?
Sure. So any supplement, especially a detox supplement or a hot trending supplement, is going to have a lot of companies are going to try to take advantage, hop on the bandwagon, and start coming out with supplements that are easily marketed. And liquid and nano zeolites are just easier. They're trendy. They're easier to market. You don't have to mix powder with water. You just spray it. I mean, it's easier. So you have to consider that. And originally, there was only powdered zeolite because zeolite is a big mineral. So it looks like this huge rock and then you can process it into smaller sizes. There's no such thing as liquid zeolite in itself. There was a pharmaceutical company who had patented a, a liquid zeolite. They liquefied the zeolite, but they couldn't do anything with it because it destroyed the structure. So that no one uses liquid. So there's no such thing as liquid zeolite. So when we refer to liquid zeolite, we're referring to the micronized zeolite, and then it's mixed with water. So I think there's three categories when we're talking about, let's just say natural zeolites. You've got the powders, you've got the liquids, and you've got the nanos. So initially everything was a powder and there are various particle sizes, generally just GI binders, kind of, really grainy, large, kind of unpleasant, kind of sandy type, just for a gut binder, kind of like a charcoal or a clay or something else of that nature, except still has a different set of advantages because it's a selective binder. So it can be taken on a consistent basis. You don't have to worry about nutrient depletion, et cetera. So then you had this liquid zeolite movement, and most of them, they were just taking the powder that was available and they were mixing it with a bit of water and they were calling it a liquid zeolite. And, because it's trendy and all this other stuff, most of them were marketing it as super small particles or nano, but it was exactly the same thing. And on the label, you're looking at less than 1 milligram of zeolite. And then when you're looking at the powders, you're looking at maybe, 5,000 milligrams or 1,000 milligrams at least, kind of depending on even the capsules, probably 500 milligrams per cap type of thing. So there was that. And that, I think people kind of started catching on that was a little bit of a scam. But the trick, and we'll get into this, is that a lot of people were experiencing detox reactions with it, which was leading them to believe that it was working. And we'll definitely get into that. But after we had this liquid zeolite movement and there was some lawsuits, there was lots of stuff going on here with these liquids. And most of them also were multi-level marketing, which adds another layer of complexity just because of the marketing angle, right? And then you have thousands of independent distributors promoting something, which, is fine, but you have, the information being presented, you have to take it for what it is, right? So like when I'm selling zeolite, I'm obviously biased type of thing, right? You just have to understand that. So we had the liquids. Then you had the nanos more recently, where the true nanos actually are smaller particle sizes. So that's the good news, right? They've actually done something a little bit different. It's a different manufacturing process, and you've got these super small particles mixed with water. So those at least are a little bit more legitimate than the straight liquids that are just the powders mixed with water. But still, I don't recommend them for a number of reasons, which I can get
And
into.
yeah, I'd love that. Yeah, it's
Right.
am I guessing correctly? Where the one thing is you just can't high dose it enough, or if you would, it would be really expensive.
Yeah, so the two really things that I focus on with the Zeo, really any supplement, is quality and quantity, right? You want to, if you don't have the proper quality, you don't want to take it at a high dose, right? So those are the two things. With zeolite, it's especially important because this approach of start low and work your way up, which is great, and I was trained in that. Most people are. That's great with a lot of things, but it doesn't work with zeolite. Really, so the approach I developed, and I have a 14-page document explaining it in great detail if anyone wants to, nerd out about it on the website. But it's just you start with a high dose and you work your way down. Because a low dose is more likely to cause a detox reaction than a high dose, because a low dose is a less efficient detox. So what happens is when you take a little bit of zeolite, so this could be my product, ZeoCharge, it could be a liquid or a nano, whatever, you take just a tiny, it's a micro dose. It goes in, it stirs things up, it kind of makes a mess. But then your body has to deal with that mess. When you take a larger dose, you still make a mess, but there's enough available zeolite cages to clean up its own mess. So kind of my philosophy is you want to have enough available zeolite cages to go in and grab all of the circulating toxicity, what your body's currently exposed to, and then have a few leftover cages to bind to anything that gets dumped into circulation through this detox process. Because otherwise, you could have let's talk about detox reactions. And you can stop me at any point if I start getting too excited or talking too fast or get off topic completely. So with detox reactions, it's generally accepted that it's a great sign that the protocol is working, which is true to some extent. It does mean something is happening, but in my opinion, it definitely means that stress is being added to the body. So a lot of times, okay, the benefit's going to outweigh the cost, right? Great. So you're adding some stress, but it's going to be worth it long term to remove the toxic elements from your body. In theory, if you could detox without the reactions, that would be better, because then you could do it without feeling terrible the whole time, and you're not going to have the stress on your body. So with some things, potentially you're not going to be able to avoid the reactions. But with zeolite, we found that almost all the time you're able to detox without the reactions, but it has to be the right dose. So when people take a super low dose, it goes in, it stirs stuff up, they get these terrible reactions, and it's a sign that something is happening, but stress is being added to the system. When those same individuals take way more, so let's say they just took, and this has happened many times, people just mix a scoop of ZeoCharge with a glass of water and they take one sip or two sips, which would be equivalent dose to like a liquid or a nano. Then they feel awful. They get headaches, usually within 30 to 60 minutes, potentially irritability, joint pain, whatever it may be. The next day, they take the entire glass of ZeoCharge, so it's probably 1,000, 5,000 times the dose. They feel either nothing or they feel better. So it's not that the lower dose was working better. So the detox reaction wasn't a sign it was working better. It just means it was an inefficient detox, where the higher dose was more efficient. So the low dose will go in, it'll potentially disrupt biofilms. It'll potentially, just stir things up, and there's lots of mechanisms of action there. But basically, your body, if you have symptoms, your body has more circulating toxicity than it wants to handle at that time. So if you take a higher dose, it goes in and it's able to bind enough of the circulating toxicity that your body doesn't have to deal with it on its own, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that was great. So to clarify, like, is zeolite drawing metals out of tissues, or is it solely focusing on the blood? Because my understanding, and I'm trying to think back to several weeks ago when I listened to your YouTube video, I think you were saying with the low dose, as you said, stir things up. Does it draw metals out of the tissues and there's not enough cages to grab them? Is that kind of the idea? Or
What I think happens, and this is debated, I mean, most people are going to say zeolite just goes in and grabs metals from all over the body, tissues, and whatever. I don't think that's happening. I don't think it has to. So, and one thing I'd like to say is that our zeolite's the only zeolite that's been proven to offer a full body detox. So prior to launching, we did the 6-month case studies program because we actually wanted to see, does it work? Right? We wanted to, we wanted to see, is it going to cause aluminum toxicity, which we can prove it doesn't. We wanted to see, is it going to deplete essential nutrients, which it does. And we want to see, is it going to be able to remove heavy metals? And we saw that it was able to remove all 15 heavy metals we tested it for from the tissue level, full body. So we were really the only people that it can even prove that ours offers a full body detox to begin with. So how that's happening, I think, is up for debate. I think that the most efficient way to detox is to bind everything. So I have a level, let me go into my 3 levels of detox theory. This will make more sense, hopefully. So I think there's 3 kind of levels of toxin storage in the body, how the body processes metals. One is what I call level 1. That's kind of the gut, circulatory, just exposure, what your body is currently processing. Then you've got this next level, which is just fat, a general tissue level, where the body will store toxic elements that it's not currently processing. Then you've got level 3, which is what I call deep storage. So this is where metals go into a deeply stored area. So as an example, let's say you eat a bunch of tuna and just way too much tuna, like more tuna than you probably should have eaten, right? And your body immediately tries to remove as much of that mercury, because the mercury in tuna, from your body as possible. Whatever your body can't get rid of relatively quickly, it has to do something with, because the body's focus is short-term survival, right? Homeostasis in the blood. So the body's more focused on short-term survival over long-term survival. So what the body does is tries to get everything out. Whatever it can't get out, it doesn't want to continue floating around, because as it's floating around in level 1, then it's being attacked by the immune system. That's stimulating an inflammatory response, causing stress. So the body will then tuck it into fat somewhere. And this is generally where it's going to go into level 2, which is just general tissue. And I think it's a short-term holding area for these metals and toxic elements. And then if level 1 clears out and you have enough, I call it detox energy, then your body will release this short-term storage mercury back into level 1, you get it out. But a lot of times that just never happens because you continue being exposed to all sorts of other stuff. If level 2 fills up, then it has to go somewhere. And that's where the mercury goes into the deeper areas, which is level 3, which is really more organs. Now, sometimes it just goes straight into organs. I think there's just different storage units. But I think the key to detox is to effectively remove the level 1 toxicity, what you're exposed to. And that raises your body's detox energy and allows your body to naturally start pushing out the metals and other toxins from organs and tissue. I think what the problem with most detox approaches is they go in, and maybe it's just a different approach, but I think what most detoxes do is they go in and try to rip out metals or push metals from tissue and organs, and then they end up in circulation and just being exposed in level 1, and that's where you're getting all these symptoms. Because if you were already at max capacity in level 1, you had met your stress threshold, and now you added more to it, you're going to get a lot of symptoms because you can't handle it. So the healthier you are, the faster you detox. So one of the keys to detox is getting healthy. Of course, that's easier said than done. So that's why some people get detox symptoms, some people don't. If someone's at max capacity, they're dealing with mycotoxins, they've got microbial issues, they've got all this stuff going on, and then they try to do a detox protocol. Those are usually the people considered too sick to detox because they're already at max capacity. They don't have room in level 1. They try to push something from level 2 or 3 deeply stored into level 1, and it just makes it worse. So in those individuals, and I think really for everyone, the effective approach is remove level 1, and then at its own pace, the body will release levels 2 and 3. So you've got traditional approaches that are push catch, right? So you push metals from organs and tissue into level 1, and then you catch them with binders. I think if you're just taking zeolite, it's the opposite. It's like catch and release, where you catch the things that are just currently floating around, and then the body will release toxicants at its own pace.
That was a great explanation. And are you a fan of coffee enemas and sauna? Because I know the HTMA people, I've had a lot of them on the show, and that's kind of their go-to for kidneys and liver support.
Yeah, I think those can be effective as well. I try sometimes I think with detox less is more. There's a
Mm.
point that I call max detox where your body's going to be detoxing as fast as it ever will. And if you keep adding detox supplements and technologies on after you're at max detox, it's not going to increase the detox at all. So once you hit max detox, I think you can just continue doing what you're doing. And at that point, I don't think you want to be adding anything else in because it could potentially be causing stress. And the only thing that can happen is it slows down the detox. So I think sometimes what happens is the detox gets so stressful that your body goes into survival mode and stops releasing the deeply stored metals. And it just depends on the health of the person. So it is interesting. I think the people that have found the best results with the ZeoCharge are those who are deemed too sick to detox and then have tried other detoxes and it's just been too harsh for them because it's just the reverse approach. So instead of pushing things out of organs, it's catching and then the body at its own pace. Sometimes it takes a month to maybe even longer for the body to feel comfortable to release. But that's why you don't get the reactions because you're only releasing at your own pace.
Hmm. I wonder if that's why, or one of the reasons, of course, there's always mental, emotional stress that's a huge could be a root cause of health issues. But I wonder if that's why a lot of people can't experience weight loss in a regular sauna routine is because they're releasing these metals from their adipose and then they're just circulating and getting redistributed, right? And we know that heavy metals are obesogens, right?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So, and that's what I mean, when you think about it's all the body's intelligent, right? When we try to outsmart the body, we always lose that battle. And I think that's a lot of times what we try to do with detox. And when you think about the body's focus, which is, homeostasis in the blood, it's short-term survival, the body would prefer to keep something incredibly toxic like mercury in fat or even in your brain, even if it's deteriorating your brain, it would prefer that to having it exposed and being attacked by the immune system causing inflammation. Because when you tuck these metals away, they're hiding from the immune system. Now they might be still causing, nervous system issues and other issues, but it's still less stressful than having them floating around being actively processed by the body. So that's what I think that's a really important key to understand when you're thinking about detox is just what is the body prioritizing. So if your body is focusing on mental emotional stress and any sort of stress is anything that makes the body work harder than normal to stay balanced. That could be anything. As your body's focusing on those things, that's taking away from your body's natural detox energy, just the total resources it has available to allocate towards detox. And at that point, you're just all those metals that are stored, whether it was from a slow accumulation over time or it was from a couple of acute exposures, they're just not going to go anywhere because your body's not going to have the confidence to be able to release them and safely get them out of the body without causing too much issues.
Hmm.
And I've seen this with chelation, which is very interesting. And this was a big shock to me because there's one chelator, OSR, which from Boyd Haley, which is the strongest known chelator, lots of clinical research on animals and humans. And it's for mercury. And no, don't go out and buy this, people. I'm not promoting it. I used to, and you can't get it either. It's in trials to be a drug. But
so this is stronger than like EDTA and
waste, but not even
PS and okay,
not even close. By far the strongest, and it's specifically designed for mercury because most of the chelators are not effective at all for mercury.
Mm-hmm.
And this is hydrophobic, so it goes straight into fat.
Wow.
It was specifically designed by this guy Boyd Haley to remove mercury from your brain because he was doing research at University of Kentucky, discovered the correlation between Alzheimer's, mercury toxicity, and said, how do we get it out? And there was no effective solutions to his knowledge. So he developed this compound. And in the studies, it was had such a strong bind to mercury that when they bound this OSR compound to mercury, it developed a completely non-toxic compound that you could then feed to animals. It didn't even hurt them. So once it binds to mercury, it never lets go. Incredibly strong bond. In the animal studies, it was able to go into organs, into the brain, remove all the mercury safely, not stressful at all. Incredible. They did a lot of studies on coal miners, also incredible results. Now, there's a huge difference in detoxing someone that is healthy and someone that is chronically ill. And that's really important to understand as well. So that particular chelator is going to be incredible if you were just exposed to mercury and it's in the blood, you go and grab it. But the key is if your body does not want to let go of mercury, it will not let go no matter what you do. So there's a lot of people who take that chelator that have complex illnesses and it does not remove the mercury from their body at all. And this was a shock. I just learned this a couple of years ago because I had there was a lot of people taking it, including family members. And after I started testing, I realized it wasn't doing it. And it was because it was basically fighting against the body, and the body was not ready to release the mercury from the tissue, mostly the brain with the amalgam fillings, because it was going to be too stressful on the way out. And a lot of people experience this tugging effect where it's like a tug of war in their brain, where I think what's happening is this chelator is there trying to remove the mercury and the brain cells just won't let go. So anything like that, you want to stay away from. Now, in a perfectly healthy person, you're just exposed to mercury. You were poisoned by mercury, something like that. Incredible, because your body doesn't want the mercury. It doesn't know what to do with it. It's going to accept the chelator and remove it from the body. Once the mercury has settled from chronic exposure over time, detox becomes a completely different game. And that's where I think the natural release at its own pace is really the only way to get it out.
Have you heard of the Andrew Cutler protocol? My friend did that for a while, and he said it was hugely beneficial with ALA, alpha lipoic acid, but it was every 4 hour dosage, and you have to do it consistently for I think it was a minimum of 2 weeks. So literally, you have to disrupt your sleep every night for 2 weeks straight minimum. Because you have an alarm on your phone and you take it every 4 hours.
Yeah, I think it's a highly inefficient way to detox, highly stressful. Any of these detoxes that are getting metals out could definitely be beneficial because you're getting metals out. But at what cost and to what extent are you getting the metals out? I think a lot of times people think they've finished detoxing, but really their body just stopped releasing metals because the experience became too stressful. I think that's one thing. And from testing that I do, the tissue testing, it's very difficult. Sometimes it's very difficult to remove, especially mercury from tissue. A lot of the other metals are very easy, but when it comes to deeply stored mercury, especially people that have 12, 14 amalgam fillings in their mouth, they all have mercury in tissue, every single one I've ever tested. And it's just been there for 30, 40, 50 years. It's hard to get rid of. So things like the Andy Cutler protocol, it's definitely helps a lot of people. So I don't want to say anything bad about it, but I wouldn't recommend it to anyone personally. I found a lot of people switched over to ZeoCharge, and it's worked not only much more effectively, but much faster. And that just goes back to a lot of people, they're not experiencing any reactions at all when they take ZeoCharge, so they don't think it's working as well. But really, it's just working so much more efficiently. And then they start testing and they realize not only is it working, it's working faster than the other detoxes because it's so efficient and the body's willing to release more metals at a time. So back to your question, which I never answered, about does the zeolite go into tissue? I don't know. I would assume that no zeolite goes into tissue. It's actually just going to be binding free-floating toxicity, and then the body will naturally release tissue at its own pace. And I'd also like to say something about detoxing the brain, because one of the claims for a lot of zeolite products, and like one of the main reasons people buy the nanos, is because they say, well, it's small enough to get into your brain. And the best way to detox your brain is not to put anything, especially zeolite, in your brain. Do you really want zeolite in your brain? I don't want zeolite in my brain. So we don't want anything that small, first of all, because the best way is to remove the circulating toxicity, and then the body, through its natural glymphatic and natural detox functions, will push metals out of the brain. So I think that's what's happening. One more thing on that, and then I'll let you ask another question. So I'm trying to circle back to some of the questions I didn't answer when I went on our little rant there. But with the liquids and the nanos, once again, the whole point is, well, these are small enough to be able to be absorbed into the circulatory system and detox the entire body. And they're claiming that the powders are not small enough. And a lot of the powders are larger particle sizes. We basically combined the super small particles with the large particles. We don't have anything in the nano range, like less than 100 nanometers, because we don't see any benefit to that. Because when you have something so small, a lot of the toxic elements are larger than the cage. And if it can't fit in the cage structure, you've kind of defeated the purpose. So we have what we basically think is the optimal range. So we've got less than sub 1 micron, so super tiny. And then we go up to about 6 micron. But we don't have anything. Our old version that was up to like 25 micron. Some of them are like 80 or 120, really grainy. So we've done a lot of work. But the liquids and nanos at the dose, in order to even be absorbed, as they're all claiming they are, when you think about the absorption process, you take the nano or the liquid, assuming it's just traditional zeolite. There are maybe 1 or 2 liposomals, so we'll exclude those for now. but just the normal zeolites, they're going to have to be absorbed through the GI tract. So you take the liquid in the nano in the mouth, goes through the esophagus into the stomach, it enters the small intestine. And then if it's small enough, it will go through the small intestine, the gut lining, the intestinal lining, and be absorbed into the bloodstream, at which point then it would carry on, start trapping toxic elements, and then, as they're claiming, will then make its way to the brain and other organs to detox. So if you're taking a product that has virtually nothing in it, let's say most of them are 300 micrograms, which is less than 1 milligram, that means you'd have to have zero toxicity in your entire digestive tract in order for that zeolite to be available, to be absorbed, and to have, and then zero toxicity in your bloodstream in order to make it to an organ to actually detox something. It's not going to happen. So when you really stop to think about some of the claims that these zeolite companies are making, it's marketing, right? So I don't claim that it's going into the brain. I don't claim it's doing any of that stuff because I don't know. I don't think it is, but I don't think it has to be. In theory, the only way to actually get any zeolite into the bloodstream would to take a high enough dose to bind all of the toxicity in the digestive tract and then have leftover cages to actually be absorbed into the bloodstream. That's the only way to do it when you really think about it. So so the liquids and nanos, once again, people have reported good success. So I don't want to completely say they're completely worthless, like with anything. And I think there's a number of mechanisms potentially there. One, placebo. It is very powerful, right? And when you have 10,000 reviews, 5-star reviews of something, it's going to be powerful. And if that's helping someone, fantastic. You can keep taking the product. Even super low doses in some people can be helpful as well, not because it's necessarily detoxing, but because it's binding. And those are the kind of the two classifications of what happens when you take a zeolite. You've got a binding effect and you've got a detox effect. So when I say binding, I'm referring to level 1 exposure. And that's usually what makes you feel good. When you take a zeolite product and you feel better right away, it's generally not because you're removing deeply stored mercury and metals. It's because you're binding to various toxic elements that were stressing out your immune system and causing your body to work overtime to stay balanced.
Like endotoxin is one, right?
Exactly. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. So really, I think in order to get a full body, because a lot of people take zeolite for years and they think they're detoxing, but they're not detoxing because you have to have enough. So there's what I consider the daily dose of toxins, and that's what you're exposed to on a daily basis. So we've got the external exposure, food, water, air, personal care products, just everything, right? But then the most overlooked source of toxicity, which very few people talk about, is the internal production of toxins. Our bodies are natural toxin factories. So most of the toxins that we're exposed to on a daily basis are made within our bodies. These are things like metabolic waste products. So things like ammonia. Then we've got microbial waste products, the very microbial issues. They're releasing waste products. We've got, histamine, we've got free radicals, we've got all this stuff. And then if we're, of course, if we're exposed to mycotoxins and whatever, these things, I consider them regenerative. So every single day, you've got a new toxic load. So a certain amount of your zeolite or whatever detox you're doing is primarily going to be focusing on that because that's what the body's focus and that's what it's the first line, what it's exposed to. So you have to have enough zeolite to bind to all of that and then extra if you want to get to the next level of detox. So a lot of people will take a little bit, it reduces some of that level 1 toxicity, your daily dose, and you do feel better because your body has some help, some assistance, but it doesn't mean you've actually started detoxing. So it's kind of interesting. So binding versus detox, it's just this whole thing. But yeah, that's what it all goes back to dose.
That's fascinating. Yeah, it's a good distinction. So with your 6-month case study and when you refer to like removing metals from the tissues and you prove that, are you using HTMA, hair tissue mineral analysis for that? Or
so for our case studies program, we utilize the Oligo scan.
Okay.
So OLIGO scan, and it's a tissue test. So it's really the only one because you've got, and all the tests, I like all the tests. It's just you have to understand what you're looking at. So urine is measuring excretion from the urine, blood, circulatory, hair, excretion from the hair, kind of a 3-month average, and so on. There's other tests. So those are all measuring level 1, right? What's being excreted, what's being processed. The Oligo scan is the only test besides a biopsy that is actually measuring tissue. So you're still going to get you're going to get false negatives on all tests because you're not doing a biopsy. But the illegal scan I like because you're getting a little deeper level and you're looking at the tissue in the palm of your hand. So you're not seeing what's in your brain, what's in your kidneys, what's in your liver, what's in your organs, what I consider level 3. But the baseline test is this level 2 general tissue area. So what I like on any heavy metal test, when you retest, you want the metals to rise, every single test, because that indicates you have increased excretion and your body's processing the metals. That's what you want. Now, if you get an increased level on the hair, the urine, and the blood, that's fantastic because you know they're coming out of a tissue somewhere. But what you don't know is, are they coming out of general tissue or are they coming out of organs? With the illegal scan, if the level rises, since general tissue was your baseline, you know they're coming out of the deeper level. So that's one reason I like it. If you could do all the tests consistently, you're going to get the best data. So, and the HTMA is completely different. HTMA is great for, you know, the mineral balancing programs because you're able to look at the ratios. The ratios are just different on the illegal skin. You can't really do, like Matt was saying, Matt Kaufman, you can't really come up with a mineral balancing protocol from the illegal scan. So HTMA's got the advantage there. But in terms of just seeing, is your body pushing out metals from deep storage, the illegal scan works great because you can see if the level goes up and down type of thing.
Yeah, my current protocol, and I'm kind of the guinea pig. I was talking to Matt Kaufman about this. Is your product ZeoCharge combined with the high dose melatonin that I sell? And I've had Dr. John Lawrence on the show, and I've listened to hours of Russell Ryder and all these melatonin experts. And I'm taking 200 milligrams a night, and it turns out melatonin is such a powerful heavy metal chelator. And my nickel's off the charts, the highest Matt's ever seen on a test, and I'm dumping all the metals. So something I'm doing, and he's convinced it's my melatonin that's doing it. So
Yeah,
we'll see.
no, I actually I make 180 milligram melatonin capsules mixed with magnesium biglycinate. So yeah, and I was putting a lot of people on those short term during for a mercury detox along with the ZeoCharge, because if there was any stress being added to the system as you're removing deeply stored mercury, it's incredibly toxic to your central nervous system. And melatonin is probably the strongest antioxidant for your central nervous system. So just for that effect, I really like it for that. And yeah, just detox potential on its own. I mean, just the ability to detox the brain from various things. And yeah, I like it as well. So there's a lot of, what I tell people is there's a lot of ways to get from point A to point B. I'm not saying ZeoCharge is the only way to detox. It's not the only thing that works. It's not the only way you're going to be able to get out deeply stored metals. Like, we know
Well, it
that.
sounds like it could be a great synergy, like with my little
Right.
experiment I'm doing.
Exactly. I like to call it a foundation. So like Matt with the mineral balancing, he's using it, he's using the mineral balancing as the primary and then the ZeoCharge kind of as a secondary type of thing. I like to use ZeoCharge as the primary. Of course, I'm going to be biased, and then other things as secondary type of, so it just kind of depends, but it does work really well with a lot of other things. A lot of people, as you mentioned earlier, will combine it with like the enemas, with the saunas, potentially, ionic foot baths or whatever they may be doing. And I think that can all be beneficial. One thing that's interesting, it's a binder, right? Zeolite is considered a binder. Maybe we should go into what it binds to too. But
Yeah. Yeah. Well, uh,
Right.
I wanted to ask you about the oligo scan.
Yeah.
I really like to do it. I'm up fully off grid deep in the woods. And so it's always a challenge to get testing done. Ideally, I do like home tests, but can you get a home unit or is it super expensive?
I can connect you with his name is Jeff as well, who runs the company. If you want like you get them as a practitioner.
Oh, okay.
Generally, they're designed for clinics, and then you have to go in person to get tested because it's a physical scan. So,
And I'm picturing like this is different from the biofeedback where you put your hands on the little metal. This is completely different.
no, yeah, that's all different. This is spectrophotometry, so it's actually shining light, measuring the reflection of the elements in your hand, and it's a very precise measurement. So, with any sort of bioenergetics or any of that, you're going to have very low reproducibility. Not saying they're not good, but things change. So there's issues with this. It's going to be incredibly reproducible. So
Wow.
just because and you can't get a false positive. It's just shining light, measuring the reflection of it, and then the algorithm. based on your height, weight, blood type, all that spits out the data.
Is it because every mineral has a different light
Yeah.
emission? Is that
I mean,
okay?
when you look at this is how a lot of lab tests are analyzed. When you send in your blood for just a traditional lab panel and a lot of things, people are not looking at that blood through a microscope, right? There's light spectrometry, there's things shining at it, measure. It's the same concept, very similar concept in a lot of lab tests. So yeah, it's not like exactly new technology, but this is unique because they basically had to develop the reference range, and that's what took so long. So they had to sample, I don't 100,000, I don't know, people from all over the world to determine what is a normal level of these metals and minerals. Because that's what you have to do with any lab test is you have to test a bunch of people and you basically take the average or the median, and that's, the baseline level. So that's what they had to do, and that's what took them so long to develop the technology. But it's a very simple technology just for, people that understand that science. So I
That's
like it.
really cool.
I think it's
I'm
really
looking
cool.
I'm looking forward to doing it. That sounds exciting.
Yeah.
Um,
So I'm gonna be with them in 2 days in Vegas for this dental conference. So they go to a lot of events. So if you're at like the biohacking events, or they'll be at Dave Asper's event in whenever that is, end of May. They're at a lot of stuff. So if you ever go to those events, look for them, the Illegal Scan, and you can buy a test from them and get the results. The results are instant. So you get the test, you get it right away. Yeah. So that's what I like.
That's cool. Let's talk about what zeolite binds to. I love on your website. There's just so much information. You could spend hours, and I'm all about that with Mitolife too. It's just like just throwing tons of detailed information out there on all the products and all the nuance and details. And I like that you do that with ZeoCharge. It's not just metals, right? Like you have the website histamine and I think even
Yeah.
the V word. I don't know if we get censored. A lot of stuff.
Yeah, it binds to a lot. There's two ways that zeolite detoxes: direct binding capacity and indirect detox effect. So directly, it's been shown to bind to a number of things, which I think is what makes it so effective. So heavy metals, it binds to mycotoxins like aflatoxins, ochratoxin A for sure. It binds to radioactive materials like cesium and strontium. And in fact, zeolite was used commercially after Chernobyl nuclear disaster to help clean up the water supply in the environment. And it reduced cesium by like 99% or whatever it did an incredible job. So it's been used commercially, and zeolite is used for a number of industrial commercial purposes, water filtration, all sorts of stuff. And that's another reason you have to be careful, because a lot of companies take this commercial zeolite from these commercial US or China mines, wherever they're coming from, package it and say, here you go. And it's going to be completely different. It's just not what you want. So it's binding to mycotoxins, to radioactive materials, to histamine, to free radicals, which is interesting. The metals, ammonia, which is the big one. I think that's a really big one. It binds to
Does it touch like bacteria or?
It it definitely helps balance bacteria, but I think it's not binding directly to the bacteria because it doesn't bind to good bacteria. So I don't think it's binding to any bacteria itself. It's binding to the lipopolysaccharides from the gram-negative bacteria. So I think that's what's happening, and just improving the environment so that your body can actually balance out the microbial issue. So one of the things that a lot of bacteria produce is ammonia. So things like that, it definitely binds to. Candida also produces tons of toxic elements, ammonia included, binds to a lot, some of those things. So I think that's a lot of times what helps so much with the parasites, with the bacteria, the yeast, the V word. It's not, well, the V word, it actually does directly bind to. If we're talking about,
cool.
There's multiple.
I'm extremely shadow banned on Instagram, so now I'm like, I don't know if they take me off podcasts, the Apple, So I'm trying not to hit the buzzwords. Yeah,
it's not the mRNA one. We're talking
right.
like the common cold type of thing. Okay, so there's been studies showing zeolite does directly bind to V particles.
Okay, wow,
right, including COVID. Recent study. So
because you could really you went to the particle size earlier. You can look up the particle size of different things, and most of the time, you could see what zeolite will capture. What 100 nanometers up to 6 microns?
It just depends on. So there's the particle size, but it really depends on what it has a binding affinity to.
Mm.
based on atomic weight and a number of other factors. So one is the size, and quickly on the size, what zeolite can both absorb, basically adsorb and absorb. So it can bring things into its structure through that swap mechanism, which is the most efficient way to detox, but it can also adsorb, attach toxic elements to its structure. So technically, let's say you have a 100 nanometer zeolite cage and it comes across a 300 nanometer toxic element, it could still, that toxic element could attach to the surface, but it's not going to be as strong of a bond. It's more likely to drop it. And that could be an issue. But there's a limit. So if you have something that's multiple microns, maybe it's not going to bind. Like a lot of the nanos are like two nanometers. So if you have something that's 2 nanometers, then you have a mycotoxin that's 100 nanometers, or maybe like a multiple, like 1,000 times or 100 times. It's like, how efficient is it really going to be able to detox that specific thing? And that's where I think the larger particles are a little better. So the argument, I'll give credit to the nanos here. The argument is the smaller the particle size, the more surface area you have, which is true to some extent. So if you have these super, because otherwise people would say, why don't we just take super large particle zeolites? Because they're going to be able to bind everything. Now, the issue there is that you would need to take such an incredibly high dose that it would just be undoable and it would be very unpleasant because there's less surface area with the larger particles. So that's where we wanted small enough to be able to get what we needed to get for surface area, but large enough to be able to trap everything we wanted to trap. So it's kind of how that works. And then it's not just going to trap everything though. It's based on, it's a selective binder. Mm-hmm. So that's where it's going to be able, it's been shown to bind to a lot of toxic things, but I think what's misunderstood, what's overlooked, and probably even more important is the indirect detox effect. So as you remove so much circulating toxicity and all these metabolic waste products and various things, then your body is able to naturally release indiscriminately toxic elements. So that's why zeolite can detox fluoride, and it can detox it has no direct affinity for fluoride at all, but it can detox fluoride. So I think it can detox a lot of other things, but that's just because now the body has enough energy to dump these things that it was storing in tissue or bone or wherever it was storing it, because zeolite bound to so many things that it was attracted to. So when people ask me, does ZeoCharge detox this? Does it have a direct binding capacity for it? That's one question, but does it detox it? Probably.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to have a direct binding capacity to detox it.
Have you looked into aldehydes? I had a practitioner on a couple times, and he's all about aldehyde toxicity, that said most of the plants walking around drunk, even if they're not drinking alcohol.
I haven't looked into that.
Okay. So I'm curious if it would help with drink alcohol consumption or just endogenous.
It does. Actually, it does. So actually, I have looked into it a little. The original use case for a zeolite supplement was a hangover cure.
Oh, really?
Actually, initially. So it actually does absorb aldehyde. It absolutely does. I think some companies will market it for that. So it actually,
funny.
Yeah, it actually does help quite a bit with that. It absorbs a number of gases as well. So they were even looking at it at one of the Ivy League schools for like methane gas and things. They're using it in different like plastic materials for like food storage to absorb gases as they start decaying. So it's used for a lot of different things. But yeah, I think it's really, and I think that's why zeolite is so much more powerful than the synthetic chelators and a lot of detox agents, because they're so selective. So like back to the OSR, way stronger bind than zeolite to mercury. But we found that the ZeoCharge is much more effective at detoxing mercury than that. And that's what was stunning. And I didn't know this until the case studies, because before I was saying, yeah, we need to take all this stuff. But then I realized just by removing all this broad, spectrum toxicity in level 1, the body naturally releases the mercury from deep storage on its own. And that's more effective than trying to go in and rip it out. That's what was interesting.
Have you ever heard of magnetochelation? Like I had Dean Bonley on the show before he passed, of Magnetico sleep pads. And I slept on that for years off and on. Like I cycled it. Like I would do 3 to 4 years straight and then take a couple years off and then get back on it. And it's pretty intense. I think because I was on 0 binders, like absolutely none. I mean, I was on Shilajit, for over a decade now, but I feel like it had long-term negative effects. And I wonder if because he has a lecture on it on YouTube still. It's great. I've watched it countless times. It it does push the metals out. And so if they're just circulating and then they just get redistributed, I think I was doing that to myself for
Yeah.
years and years.
And I think it just depends. So that's the thing. There's all these different approaches, and it just depends on, is it going to work for you specifically? Because a lot of people, especially the general healthy people, a lot of these detoxes are going to work because their body has enough natural capacity, enough resources to safely escort these metals out as they're being released by these various technologies. But the people that are at full capacity, they're super stressed with various chronic illnesses, that's where the issue is, because their body just can't handle it, and their body's going to have a difficult time releasing, because as a self-defense preservation mechanism, it's just going to keep things in storage. So that's an interesting point. A lot of people with a complex illness, they'll get tested, they have high heavy metals, or they have low because their body's not excreting. But everyone with a complex illness automatically has high heavy metals, every single person. Now, that doesn't mean the heavy metals are the root cause of the complex illness. It could be that they are a result of the complex illness. So if someone is dealing, some sort of autoimmune condition or cancer, whatever it may be from anything over time, their body has to put so much focus on that condition, then the body's not going to have energy to work on detox. It's not going to be able to prioritize it as much. So then you're going to be slowly accumulating these metals and other things over time just from daily exposure. And that's how people end up just getting incredibly toxic. And they just end up with all this toxicity, not necessarily because they're like, where did I get it? It's not like there was some huge event that caused it. Maybe there was in some people, but usually it's just a slow grind over time that their body wasn't naturally detoxing. So it kind of all comes down to how much is your body, whatever's coming in, how much is your body getting out? If everything that's entering your body can get out right away, you're not going to have accumulation. If your body can't keep up with a daily dose of toxins, then you're going to get a little bit of accumulation every single day. And over time, that adds up a lot. And that leads us to duration of detox, because people think I'm going to go on a 30-day detox, I'm going to take this smoothie or juice cleanse or whatever, and they're going to get all this metal out of their body. It all depends how long you been accumulating. If you've had a mercury amalgam fillings in your mouth for 30 years, your body's not going to let go of all that mercury and all the other metals in a month or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or 6. It's going to take a long time because the body only detoxes at its own pace. So, and that's another interesting thing. People say I'm detoxing too fast. I don't necessarily know if you could detox too fast. It depends on the protocol, I think. So like with zeolite, you can't detox too fast. You can only detox too inefficiently. Because when you're getting the symptoms, it's an inefficient detox. When you take more, the symptoms reduce or go away. So it would just maybe other protocols is different. But with zeolite, you're not detoxing too fast. That's what people think. You're detoxing too inefficiently. You want to optimize the protocol there.
That's awesome.
It's going to take a while, right? I'm still detoxing. The people I test, these metals cycle back and forth. And I've kind of identified how I think the body really detoxes through, some of them are on the case studies. I've got a video called Detox Cycling, which I think is on the site. It's on some site or Rumble. It's somewhere on the internet, Detox Cycling. And it just shows how the body will take metals in an effective detox protocol. The body will take metals from organs or deep storage. It'll transfer them to general tissue. And at this point, they're not leaving the body. So if you did a urine test, they're not leaving at this point. But then they take them from general tissue and cycle them out the body through the natural detox pathways. And then it repeats over and over. So it's never just dumping metals from organs to tissue. It's going in these cycles. So and I can show numerous case studies showing that, and it's incredibly interesting, but it makes sense. And that's one thing I think that can explain why people get unexplained symptoms randomly when they do nothing different. The body's going through this different phase of detox, and all of a sudden now, because it's more stressful a lot of times when the metals are going from tissue out the body, because that's when they're entering the processing. So during the dump phase, maybe it's okay, and your body also will use up additional vitamins and mineral resources during that time to facilitate this process and safely excrete them from the body. So it's honestly incredibly interesting, but it just goes through cycles. The healthier you are, the faster and the more metals you're going to release each month. Otherwise, it could be a very slow grind, but it's just going to take everyone, it's going to take time. So that's just one thing I want to say. I'm not saying you need to be on my product forever. I'm just saying whatever detox protocol you choose to do, if you're doing it for less than 2 years, honestly, you're not going to have all the metals out of your body because your body just won't detox faster than it wants to detox, no matter what you do.
I want to talk about timing and how long it circulates. And I don't know if that varies per person. Like I've been taking it at night, and I think that's what Matt says he likes to do because he's in parasympathetic while he sleeps. And do you have people that take it twice a day, or is it generally once a day?
So I differ from everyone. I mean, most of my philosophy on zeolite is completely the opposite of every other company, which I'm okay with. So whether you can decide if I'm right or I'm wrong, but so with the dosing, and I always encourage experimentation as well. Figure out what works for you. There's so many factors. These cookie cutter approaches, you just have to personalize everything to you. So in terms of dosing, I have found that one single dose per day is much more effective and gentler on the body than doing multiple doses. So, and one of the keys is you have to get, it's not a cumulative amount of like the high dose, it's per dose. So initially in our case studies, we had people doing 5 grams, which was one scoop, twice per day. And it was working pretty well, but it was negatively impacting some of the vitamins and minerals. And I do want to talk about that with all the claims that it doesn't mess up minerals at all. So remind me of that if I forget. But when we switched to 2 scoops once per day instead of the split dose, it reversed it. And people's minerals and vitamins were improving while detoxing. So I think for a lot of the people, and it wasn't everyone, some people were doing fine on the one twice a day, but the people that weren't needed to go to 10 grams once per day. And it's just because they needed a higher dose. So that's why one reason I like taking 1 dose per day is that if it is causing some stress on your body, which you don't always know, because on the subclinical level, you might be experiencing some stress even without symptoms. And if that's the case, you don't want to be taking a detox agent for super long time without taking a break because it might be stressing stuff out and then you'll get symptoms eventually, right? So that's where with most protocols, you want to kind of pulse on and off because they're adding stress to the body, although they're probably helping, they're adding stress to the body. You have to stop to let the body recover. In an effective zeolite protocol, you're actually reducing the total stress load on the body while detoxing, which makes it completely unique. So at that point, you actually don't want to go off of it because when you go off of it, it actually adds more stress to your body than when you were on it, as long as it's working well. But if you're doing 2 doses a day at lower dose and you just assume everything's going great, if it's causing a little bit of stress, you're causing stress twice a day. So that's one reason I like once a day, even if you're doing a low dose, like 1 scoop. If you do it once a day, even if it causes a little bit of stress, you have the full day to recover. If you're going to do, let's say, 4 scoops per day, definitely do all 4 scoops at once. Don't split it up because whatever you do, just do it at once. Everyone else's theory is that because they say zeolite stays in your body for about up to 8 hours, and that's going to vary a little bit, but let's say 4 to 8 hours, they're saying we need to take it 3 times a day so we have continual binding effect. That's what everyone else says. And originally, that's kind of what so it sounds good, right? But it's just, I think because everyone else is looking at it from the perspective of you're going in and grabbing, it's just a constant 24/7 detox. I think what you want is once, and then the body for the rest of the day can do what it wants to do. So you bind, you reduce the stress load once, and then for the rest of the rest of the day, the body is naturally releasing metals slowly at its own pace. I think that's what happens, and that's why you don't get the symptoms. So I don't know. Some people take it twice a day. It's fine, but overall, if you're just starting off, I would say once per day.
Yeah.
And
What if someone has like great vitamin and mineral status and they have full capacity, liver, kidneys are working great. You have all your nutrients coming in. What about 20 grams twice a day, like just balls to the wall? Have you ever done that? Or
and that's what I'm not sure about. So in theory, like even that, I would say just do 40 grams all at once because some people need super high doses. I personally take 40 grams a night. If I had to pay a full price, I wouldn't be doing that. But you can't overdose on it. You can only underdose on it. So if you want to err on the side of caution, you always want to take more. If money's not an issue, just take more. But of course, it is, and you don't want to be wasteful. Like if you take too much, whatever's not used, you're just wasting basically in your body, right? So that's in terms of money you're wasting, but that's why you always want more. So like with my mom, actually, we did some experiments where she was doing, because she was doing a lower dose, like 10 grams for a couple years, also taking OSR. I assumed this stuff was just getting all the mercury out. She had 14 fillings in her mouth. We start testing her, no mercury was leaving her body this whole time.
Huh.
She had no symptoms of improvement. All the other metals were going, but nothing was really moving. So I take her off OSR. I double her dose to 20 grams of ZeoCharge. It was like 20, 25 grams of ZeoCharge. Test her 30 days later. Immediately, she's dumping mercury. And her vitamins skyrocketed. Her minerals balanced like ridiculously. It was all because of the dose. And she actually started feeling an improvement for the first time. 2 years, no improvement, both symptomatic and the test. After 30 days of doubling the dose, bam, we have symptoms improvement. So then she went to 6, which was actually a little bit better, 6 scoops, which was 30 grams. And she's now, she does like 4 to 6 a day now. But we actually bumped her to 30 grams twice per day. But we didn't see any, like there was zero change between just 6 scoops once per day and 6 scoops twice per day. There was no, because she was at max detox. So when you hit the max detox, your body's not going to detox faster if you just keep taking more. So we're like, we're not going to keep, wasting this. So we bumped back down. She's doing either between 4 and 6 every single day. She's still on this cycle of detox. Central nervous system started calming down. Eyesight started improving. Like some just things. Like it was 4 months after that where she said, I'm not in a hurry anymore. She was always running late, just like she was calmer, central nervous system. And she thought she's trying to figure out what it was. And I'm like, it's probably just the mercury leaving type of thing. So this just shows you, I'm not trying to sell you more product here. It's the dose. It's all about dose. So that's why you want to, at least starting off, err on the side of a higher dose to make sure you're getting to all levels of detox. Because what she was doing was taking a binding dose. So it was still probably beneficial binding to the daily dose of toxins. She wasn't accumulating anything more, but she didn't have enough to get the body to the point where it was going to naturally release the deeply stored stuff. So once per day, high dose, that's what I go for.
And what time do you take it? Like I'd imagine in between meals?
I like it. So once again, everyone else says you have to take it on an empty stomach. I say take it whenever you're going to take it consistently and do it at the same time every day. In all the animal research, it's always taken with food because they mix it with the animal feed and it improves nutrient status. So, and I'm going to get into that in a second, the nutrient status and the minerals. So it can be taken with food for sure. I think it's just different. So if you take it with food, some of the available zeolite, we'll call them zeolite soldiers, they're going to go in and start working on some of the toxicity from the food, whether it's actual, pesticides or something from the food, or it's just metabolic waste products that your body's producing from digestion, like ammonia, because you're going to have increased levels of oxidative stress when you eat and just stress in general. So if you take it after a meal, you're going to help with that. If you take it on an empty stomach, since you're not dealing with the stress of digestion, you're probably going to be able to go after some other things. So initially, I was always taking it on an empty stomach, but now at this point, I'm taking it about 30 to 60 minutes after dinner every single night. That's what I do. I like to take it in the evening because I'm calmer. I'm more parasympathetic. Because if you need to be the more you're in a position to detox, the better you're going to detox. And then you have the night. It's going to be working through the night as you're sleeping and your liver's working and all this other stuff. So that's my preference. But honestly, I haven't found a huge difference, regardless of when it's taken, morning, night, with food, away from food. A lot of people take it first thing in the morning. In my theory, in my mind, I say for heavy metals, that might not be ideal because the body during a short, like if you're doing intermittent fasting and you haven't eaten for 14, 16, 18 hours, your body retains heavy metals just as it retains essential nutrients. And there's the animal studies showing this, that even mercury and some of the toxic metals, the body retained up to 10 times as much after, I think, 16 or 18 hours of fasting, which makes sense, right? The body starts holding on to things. So the detox might not be effective for heavy metals if you're taking it first thing in the morning, but maybe it's more effective for mycotoxins and plastics and environmental toxins because those don't resemble minerals. So heavy metal detox is really almost a whole nother category of detox than everything else. It's kind of like fasting. Everyone thinks fasting is just going to go and detox you. I think for a lot of toxic elements, it's true, but for heavy metals, I don't think it does. I think it has the opposite effect where the body goes in survival mode and doesn't release any of the heavy metals, just like it doesn't relieve the essential nutrients.
Wow.
I have a
Yeah.
buddy.
Okay.
I was going to say I have a buddy in Hawaii who did a 40-day water fast recently, and he did 33 days straight water, like no salt, nothing, like straight water, and he was like 165 pounds fit, like not didn't have a lot of weight to lose. And then he did 7 days of it, maybe a little coconut water, potentially bone broth, omega, something, right? But I mean, that's pretty intense. And he then after that started to, I actually I was down there last year. So I tested him with the illegal scan. I tested, they were like kind of an off-grid community. It's pretty cool. And they were pretty healthy in general, had some good tests, but he, it looked pretty good overall, but then he started taking the ZeoCharge and actually noticed like an incredible benefit, like digestion wise. He went off, got worse, and got it. There was something there that wasn't addressed by the fasting that was being addressed by the ZeoCharge. And we recently retested him in Hawaii, and his metals, like he's detoxing now, like his metals were way higher. So he definitely had a bunch of stored metals in organs that were not removed during the fast. So we didn't have consistent testing, so I don't know what was happening. So it's not great data, but we know that it definitely didn't get all the metals out. And now that he's taking the ZeoCharge, we know for sure he's getting to this deep level.
Wow.
So it's kind of interesting, kind of the opposite of what a lot of people think.
Yeah. I wanted to share my testimony recently with it. I think I've been on it since I talked to Matt, I don't know, 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago or something. I recently got back from a natural health conference, and this is one of the most jam-packed, I mean, thousands and thousands of people that you're interacting with and walking by for, 2 days, and, harsh fluorescent lights. And I always just feel thrashed at those conferences. And I probably should have been wearing yellow lenses, blue blockers, because I'm so sensitive if I'm just indoors most of the day under those harsh lights. So I got back to our Airbnb with my team and just felt kind of feverish, sore, watery eyes, sore throat, just like I was fighting something. And I had all my supplements there. I was on. My friends brought their supplements, so I was taking desiccated thymus and pot arco and all this stuff. But then I took 20 grams of your zeolite, and it was really within 10 or 15 minutes, I felt an immediate relief. And I was talking to my friend Pedro about it. I don't know if it was like exosomes that I was breathing in, just being around all the people, but it binded something that was circulating my system, because I immediately felt better. And I was not expecting like that immune support from it. I was actually kind of shocked.
I think, thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
And one of the main things people report is that once they start, they just don't get sick anymore. And it's kind of an unexpected benefit. But my background kind of in the immune regulatory space, where I was doing kind of like megadose polysaccharide extracts, and some of the research with like some of the medicinal mushroom extract, very interesting stuff. You need megadoses on that stuff too to get the optimal dose. But even with all that, and those were really expensive products when taken at the high doses, I found the ZeoCharge to actually be the most potent immune regulator of anything. And it's a completely different mechanism, because if you have all this toxicity, like you said, exosomes or whatever, adding all that to your, toxic load that your immune system's, working overtime to handle, you can take these regulators and all these, support, and it's going to increase your body's natural production to fight those things, but it doesn't actually reduce the toxic elements themselves. So the opposite approach is to take ZeoCharge, and if you do them together, I think it's a 1-2 combo. But if you take ZeoCharge, it goes in and actually removes the source of toxicity, so your body doesn't have to exert as much energy. So it's kind of a different approach, but I've actually found that to be a better immune regulator than taking all the immune stimulants and modulators.
Makes
I think
sense.
if you did it together, I think that's
I should have added too. I mean, we're going to bed at midnight every night and waking up early. Or I wake up early. I can't sleep in usually. So that was harming my immune system too. Just like a lot of late nights in a row. I always don't feel good when I do that. So
Yeah, it's immune. I mean, so zeolite, I say zeolite's famous for detox, but it has a bunch of other benefits. And I mean, I think weight loss, I never really answered that question, but yeah, I think a lot of people do report pretty significant weight loss kind of as a positive side effect of the detox protocol because your body your body a lot of times accumulates excess fat as a storage unit. So you need, if you have more toxins, you need a bigger storage unit. So the storage unit is fat, and your body would prefer to have heavy metals and other toxic elements in general belly fat opposed to organs. Because if it's just in belly fat, it's a lot of times not even causing that much issue until it gets released and then circulates to an organ or exposure. But your body just wants it, so it's not going to grow the organ in order to store more metals. It's going to grow the fat. So some people have gone on these various weight loss programs and journeys that have done very well, but then there's that stubborn, they call it the stubborn last 15, 20, 5, 30, whatever it is, pounds, and you just can't lose it. And that's because your body won't let you lose it. And you don't want to lose it because it's probably there because it's storing the toxic elements. So if you remove the toxic elements and then your body doesn't need that storage unit anymore, then it will naturally let go of the fat. So weight loss is, I mean, I think a detox regimen is absolutely fundamental and foundational to any weight loss protocol. Because one, if you start losing weight and you're going to mobilize toxicity. If your body lets you lose the weight, the toxins have to go somewhere. So either they're going to organs or their body has to excrete them. You're adding stress to the body. So you have to be doing some sort of detox protocol, one, to enhance the weight loss, and two, to make the weight loss safer. Because weight loss can be very dangerous. Weight loss is a very stressful experience.
A lot of health educators just say all you need to do is ground and get sunlight and you'll lose weight. I've seen that advice. It's probably a piece, but not 100%.
Well, those are good things, but it's yeah, there's a lot of good stuff out. That's the thing. It's kind of interesting because I used to be more everything. Like I would do so much stuff, and now it's like I'm really laser focused on like one product. And I like a bunch of other stuff. It's just that I really have, out of everything I've tried, the supplements, the technology, the lifestyle changes, the EMF mitigation, I found the ZeoCharge for a lot of people to be the single most effective tool. And it just depends. It just depends on the person, what they're going through. But for some people, nothing compares.
Do you think EMF sensitivity is often caused by heavy metals?
Yes. Yeah. So I think, I mean, yeah, it's the bucket analogy, the threshold. Once your body can't handle what it's got going on, it's just EMFs are negatively affecting every single person. It's just, can you feel it or not? Same with everything else. So if you're sensitive to EMFs, you're probably sensitive to mold. I call it the 4M spectrum: mold, metals, magnetic fields, and microbes. You've got them all. And a lot of times I throw in a fifth M, mental, emotional, right? So a lot of the people that are more emotionally more sensitive are also more sensitive to EMFs and sensitive to mold and sensitive to some of these other things. Kind of interesting. So, but it all adds to the bucket. But yeah, I think if you can reduce, I mean, you've got the direct effect of EMFs on metals like an antenna. So there's that. And then you've just got the additional stress load on the body where the body can't deal with some of the, the peroxynitrate production and some of the additional stressors from the EMF. So I think definitely EMF mitigation, I think is really important because they're not good for us. But I think heavy metal detox and other detox is going to be great as well, because that's one thing we can control a little bit more. Sometimes I mean, you're out in the woods, I'm in the woods. I've got, hardwired everything. Like, not everyone's going to be able to do that. And I understand that. And then we've got the satellites. It's like you can't completely get away from stuff. But we can all take control of our health through detox.
Yeah. I don't use hardwired. I have Starlink Wi-Fi and I just put it to sleep when I go to bed. I use Bluetooth devices. I just limit my exposure and then make sure I have, the vitamin C that I sell, the vitamin E, there's zinc and selenium that contribute to EMF protection. And there's all these pieces. So yeah.
You live in a bubble. Like that's the thing. Yep. It's the mental stress. I know you just did the one about the doomsday mindset.
Yeah.
I listened to some of which was good. It's like the stress of worry, the stress of trying to be healthy, a lot of times is worse than the other toxicity we're faced with. Like like we have to live, and we're not going to be able to avoid all the toxicity. So we just have to do what we can and go from there.
Yeah. Well, before we jump into the Q&A, Jeff, I wanted to touch on, you said you wanted to circle back to the disrupting vitamin and mineral status. You were telling that story of 5 grams twice a day was disrupting vitamin minerals, but 10 grams once a day didn't.
Yeah.
Did you have anything more to say on that?
Yeah,
Or
absolutely. So, and that's, one of the, claims to fame for zeolite is it's a selective binder. It's not binding to minerals. It's just this perfect thing that's going to go in and bind to every single toxic element and never cause an issue, right? So that's kind of what's out there on the internet. We just have to understand, the mechanism of what's happening. So it is nice that it is selective and it's not directly binding to essential nutrients. That's great. But we have to ask ourselves, what is the total effect of what happens when you take it? So there's two really things that can happen when you take zeolite. One, it adds stress to your body. Two, it reduces stress on your body. So ideally, when you're taking, that's where the dose comes in. The higher dose is more likely to result in reducing stress load opposed to adding stress. If you can take zeolite and have it reduce stress on the body, it's not going to negatively impact vitamins, minerals. It's going to improve those things. And there's even research showing that it improves glutathione and superoxide dismutase and antioxidant pathways. So all sorts of great stuff, but it's all about, is it reducing stress on the body? If you're adding stress to the body, there's going to be an inflammatory cascade, various things. Your body has to use additional resources to fight that stress. So a lot of those are going to be vitamins. So when you have increased oxidant, so zeolite in itself is an antioxidant. But when you take liquids and nanos and low dose zeolite, it causes oxidative stress generally because it's a stressful experience. So at that point, it depletes your vitamin status, which a lot of them are used for antioxidants. But if you're taking a high dose and your body's responding well, it acts as an antioxidant. So it can go either way. So it's not a direct binding to nutrients. It's the indirect effect that you have to be aware of. So most people, like if you're experiencing terrible symptoms on like a liquid zeolite or nano or ZeoCharge, you're probably messing up your vitamins and minerals. Now, most people would say that's perfectly fine because it's worth it to detox. But if you can detox without that happening, you want to do that. And I'm not saying it's 100% avoidable, like detox reactions are 100% avoidable all the time. It's just that there's this unique phenomena with zeolite where if you take more, you greatly reduce your chance of getting the reactions. And almost everyone can do it without the reactions or with very mild symptoms. And these are even people that have never been able to detox with anything before. So that's kind of the piece on vitamins and minerals. It's not just direct and so when you look at these claims from all these companies online that are like, no, it can't mess up your vitamins and nutrients, and it's perfectly safe for pregnancy and all this stuff because of these reasons. Like you have to just understand that it goes a lot deeper than that. You have to understand that if it's stressing out your body, it's definitely going to be messing up vitamins and minerals to some extent.
makes sense. Yeah.
Maybe I'll go over one mechanism of the higher dose. One mechanism. There's 5 reasons I'll go through on my document, and there's a video too on the site under the education tab. But one reason, I call it swap and drop. So let's say because zeolite works through the swap mechanism, and that's where a lot of the claims are that, well, no, zeolite, it's such a strong binder that if it binds to mercury, it never drops it. And that's where it can lead you astray because it might not drop it, but it can swap it and then drop it. Okay. So let's say the zeolite structure goes in, it's got the magnesium, it comes across mercury. Great. So now you've dislodged mercury from a resting place, whether it was in a biofilm or free floating or whatever. And you've replaced it with the magnesium. So you get a little bit of a mineral balance effect, but I mean, micro, so it's not. Now you've got mercury in the cage. If the zeolite with the struct mercury doesn't come across any other toxicity before it is excreted from the body, great, it's gone. But what if the zeolite cage comes across a toxic element that it's more attracted to than mercury, like lead? So zeolite's more attracted to lead than mercury. It will then swap again. So there's no limit to the amount of swaps that it will make. So now you have mercury being traded for lead. The mercury is now free floating. Maybe it was safely secured in a biofilm or somewhere. Now it's floating around. And it's got the lead. And usually the lead's pretty strong bind. It excretes it from the body. So if all of the available zeolite cages are already full or used up, nothing is there to bind the mercury. Now it's free floating. Your immune system's attacking it. It's causing a stressful experience. It's going to redistribute somewhere. If you took extra zeolite, where you had enough available zeolite cages, you now have zeolite to bind to that mercury that's floating around. So that's really the key. You want to have you just want more so you can deal with all these. That's just one mechanism to swap and drop. But that's
So
just one.
was 20 grams usually the sweet spot you found in your research? Or?
It just really depends. I mean, a lot of the people that are purchasing from Zeolite Labs I kind of designed the whole dosing theory for more sensitive people. So a lot of the things are just the average person. I mean, most people, like the average super healthy person is not going to need 20 grams, right? A lot of times they're perfectly fine with one scoop, which is 5 grams. I mean, a lot of people can take way less and they're great. I mean, some people take the liquids and they're great. Like some people just don't have a lot of toxicity circulating, or maybe they're just not getting to the deep level stuff. And they're not getting there, because sometimes that happens too. And before I answer your question there, this is actually important. Sometimes, let's say 2 scoops causes no symptoms, 4 scoops causes symptoms, 6 scoops causes no symptoms. So in this scenario, it's kind of a caveat to the dose theory. The higher dose is really to avoid redistribution from various toxic elements. But if the higher the dose you take, the more microbes are going to be released. So as you sometimes, especially have a high parasite load, if you take a high dose of zeolite, you might get a purging effect where your body just starts expelling parasites. So sometimes you take 2 scoops and it's like a binding dose. It's binding to the circulating toxicity, but you're not getting to the deep level, kind of like my mom. But then you take 4 scoops and maybe you get to the point where you're releasing mercury from the deep level, and it's a little bit stressful because now you need more. Then you go to 6 scoops and that's enough. So it's a little tricky. Just the general rule, what you have to remember, if you get a symptom, take more. So whatever you start on, if you start on 1 scoop, you get a detox reaction, take 2 or 3 scoops. If you're taking, and sometimes it's a delayed reaction. So you're doing good for a month and then you start getting symptoms. That means you've basically entered a next layer of detox. Then you want to raise your dose. So anytime you get a symptom, take more. If taking more, and not just a little, like if you take 1 scoop and you go to a scoop and a half, like take at least 2. If you're doing 3, always double it. And if that doesn't help and you get to like 6 or 8 scoops even, and if it makes you worse when you raise the dose, that means it's probably just an increased parasite or microbial release occurring, which potentially is good short term, but sometimes you get diarrhea from it, you release it. But at that point, you might want to actually lower the dose to find the level where you're not excreting the microbes too quickly, and it's all gentle. So that's just one thing. Hopefully that wasn't super confusing.
That was great.
What was the question I was in the middle of answering before? We're talking about something.
It was vitamin. Oh yeah, yeah.
So,
yeah.
So basically, what I came up with was what I found is that 6 scoops, which is 30 grams, detoxes everyone, like from the deep level. Like there's only been 1 person ever that wasn't able to remove, and she wasn't able to remove mercury, which is the stubborn one. So that's kind of the standard. Only 1 person who wasn't able to remove mercury from the deep level on 6 scoops. Every other person, hundreds of people from testing, have been able to do so. And this woman was still detoxing everything else, and it was improving nutrient status, just not mercury. And I think potentially she was on like 50 supplements, and I think it was just stressing out her body. And she had like massive, like heart, like lots of stuff going on. And I mean, the highest mercury level I've ever seen too. I think her body, and she had a lot of body fat. I think her body was just, no matter what, not going to let her detox mercury because it was just scared. And maybe I think there's like detox PTSD where you've tried other detox protocols and it was so stressful that then your body's just like not doing it again. So there was 1 case, but everyone else at 6 scoops has been able to effectively remove all the metals from all levels of detox. So we developed the ultimate zeolite experience, where it's a 5-month protocol where you start with 6 scoops. And there's 30 scoops per container. So if you need 6 scoops, it's like you have to get 6 jars for the month. So it's a lot. So this ultimate zeolite experience is a 20-pack taken over 5 months. So month 1, you do 6 scoops per day, because that's what we know is like for sure going to detox you. Like absolutely. And maybe it's more than you need, but we want to play it safe rather than sorry. If you're doing consistent testing every single month, that's another option. You probably don't need to start that high. But if If not, just start with the higher dose, right? So month one, month two, you go to 5 scoops per day. Month three, 4 scoops per day, then three, then two, and then you're done. And then you can maintain on one with the goal of you still want to continue, but at that point, 1 scoop per day should be enough to keep the detox ball rolling. What you don't want to do is take 1 scoop for like 2 years, 1 scoop a day for 2 years, assume it's working, and maybe it wasn't enough to actually open up the deep level detox pathways, and you've just been binding the whole time. So that's why,
Ideally, you're getting consistent testing, like you were saying earlier, right?
yeah, and you can see. So that's kind of what we did. That's why from the testing, we determined, okay, 6 scoops, definitely enough. Most people, 4 scoops is enough, which is 20 grams. Most people, 2 scoops is enough. A lot of people, 1 scoop is enough, but it's just how much do you have going on, right? If you've got a complex issue, if you're on that spectrum of like Lyme disease, mold toxicity, a lot of circulating toxins, if you have breast implants, if you've got amalgam fillings or have had amalgam fillings, even if they've been removed, you still have mercury in your tissue guaranteed because it does not go anywhere. I can prove that as well. If anyone wants to, I can have that data for that. So yeah, at that point, you just want to start high work down. Now, so that's the larger investment, right? That's $1,000 for the 5-month protocol for 20 days.
Interesting you mentioned breast implants because I've been trying to find a protocol for that because breast implant illness, I haven't had a show on it yet. I want to at some point, but I think there's all sorts of protocols for that. And I've like thought, oh, systemic enzymes and it can't hurt. I sell those as one of my first products, and scar tissue that's always going to be forming with inflammation, but I'm sure that's just one piece of it. So
I think, yeah, those are some of the clients who will get the fastest and most immediate results, just because they've got a lot of times, especially if they're leaking or causing issues, a high level one toxicity load, high daily dose of toxins. Anyone with a high daily dose of toxins generally responds well. Those are the people who a lot of times feel better right away. Once again, what I tell people is when you detox, you either want to feel nothing or you want to feel better. Like most people, like traditionally, you just feel worse when you detox, right? Because it's a stressful experience. But if you can detox, and that's okay sometimes, but if you're detoxing without feeling worse and you feel nothing, that's honestly, as long as you're detoxing, that's incredible. If you feel better, it's a bonus, but the feeling better is really from the binding and not from the deep level detox. That's from the deep level detox. Those are more long-term benefits, like 3-6 months or longer, where you start getting the central nervous system benefits, the mental clarity, the memory, the immune function. A lot of times that's not, immune function is more immediate, but the other ones are usually longer term. The other things are more from binding.
You mentioned earlier, like BPA, when you were talking about what it binds to. I know there's like BPS and all these different plastics. I mean, it's scary once you go down that rabbit hole. I mean, talk about doomsday. It's just like our whole life, we're just becoming more and more plastic, plasticized.
Yeah, so a lot of stuff, and that's why I do think like EDTA and things are targeted for lead and other metals, but they're missing all this other stuff. And if you just go and you start ripping out lead or a metal, and this is one of the problems with like the Andy Cutler protocol, why it's so harsh, I think you're only going after metals, but then all these other things are stirred up in the process because the metals are clumped into toxin clusters with the other stuff. And potentially you have opened some pathways and your body's dumping all this stuff. And if the chelator or the binder is only grabbing metals, your body has to deal with all the other stuff on its own. And that's where it becomes stressful. So I think that's why with the zeolite, it's so broad spectrum that it's just a gentler experience because it's binding to so much stuff. So it's just a little bit different.
It makes sense. Yeah, this is awesome. Well, it's funny because I always have listeners send in questions from social media, and I don't know, we got maybe 40 or 50 questions, and you answered 90% of them in this show. So I dwindled down to 5 Q&A questions I have for you if you're ready.
Let me one more thing on the experience.
Sure.
So that one is a larger investment, the $1,000 for 5 months, which honestly for a detox protocol, not terrible. But you can do an accelerated version as well. So let's say you want to just buy 2 jars or 3 or whatever amount. You can do tailor it. So you could do 6 scoops for 3 days. And then if everything goes well, do 5 scoops for the next 3 days, then 4 scoops the next 3 days, and go from there, right? So, and if at any point you experience a reaction, then you know to double the dose. So that's kind of one approach to do it. Now, it's better just to stick on the higher dose for longer, just in case there's internal stress or to make sure. But that's one way to do it. So if I would say that's better than just saying, I'm just going to start on one scoop and do that for
Mhm.
3 months. I would say just do, 6, 5, 4, 3, just start higher, even if it's for like a
Yeah.
day. But because you can
Okay.
start detoxing pretty quickly, but you could do a week on 6, a week on, you can tailor it to whatever your budget affords. But I always recommend, now, if you're not sensitive at all and you have no issue, like, yeah, you just take a scoop or two. And if you just want more of a binding effect, that's fine. So whatever you want to
Yep.
do, there's multiple ways to use it. I've mostly in this interview been talking about it as a detox agent. So a lot of practitioners use it as a traditional binder. So instead of charcoal, instead of bentonite
Mhm.
clay, instead of these other things, they're using zeolite. They're using a push program, kind of like Matt, right, with the HTMA stuff. He's using it as a binder to start grabbing some of the toxic elements that are being pushed out from the other thing. And if you're doing that, then go for it. And maybe at that point, you want to do twice a day because you're pushing stuff
Oh,
out, right? So
okay.
it really depends on if you're combining with other things. If you're only using zeolite as your primary detox agent, that's when I recommend basically everything I've said here, the once per day, the high dose. But if you're combining it with all sorts of other stuff, then you can really experiment and do what your practitioner says or whatever you
Oh, I'm
feel.
glad you said that. So if you're going pedal to the metal and you're doing mineral balancing with HTMA plus ZeoCharge, then maybe twice a day might be good. You have to experiment with
With
that.
three, I mean, a lot of times you're doing 3 times a day on the mineral balancing supplements. So
Yeah,
maybe you can do three because
I
you're
see.
already kind of stressing out your system
Hmm.
with
Yep.
that. So it's like maybe the zeolite 3 times a day is going to help reduce the stress more.
Interesting.
So,
Yeah.
and that's just, I mean, because so that's one approach. I personally have found this like zeolite and pretty much all binders in general to be less effective at that than like I think zeolite is better as like the main detox agent opposed to a binder. So a lot of people think they can do like a chelation protocol or something and then add zeolite and it's going to completely eliminate all their symptoms. I haven't found that to work that well, just because it's I don't know, it just doesn't seem to work as well.
Yeah.
But I think it still helps. So if you're doing
Yep.
something, add it in. But if you're using it as the primary, once per day, higher dose.
I remember Matt had my show. He said he spent, I don't know, tens of thousands of dollars on different protocols from practitioners. So on your site, the Ultimate Zeolite Experience, the 20 pack for $1,000. And then you have the protocol laid out there month one, 6, month two, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, going up to 5 months. I think that's affordable. I mean, I've I've heard stories from a lot of people I've interviewed that healed from complex illnesses that they spent, I mean, tens of thousands before they found something that was a lot more affordable that worked. So,
I mean, I'm always trying to like save people money and like, have an affordable option. But honestly, yeah, $200 a month for 5 months of something that is proven to work, like at that
yep.
dose, we know. And there's something to be said for that peace of mind where you could probably, like, if you're taking maybe like the charcoals and the bench, like maybe some of that stuff, maybe you can get off of it. Maybe there's some other detox stuff because with ZeoCharge, you can generally get to max detox. So if you're taking some random stuff that you've been taking for a long time, maybe some, I don't know, I don't want to say things, but initially I like to say just add it in and don't make a bunch of changes because you don't know what's happening.
Yep.
But then over time, you can start trying to reduce some of the others. Because even like some nutritional stuff, like people are saying their minerals and vitamins go up from the zeolite by the reduction of oxidative stress and other stress in the body. So yeah, but otherwise, foundation. I say there's good stuff out there. If you want to add your chlorella, your seaweeds, you want to add in the mineral balance, whatever you want to add it to it. If everything's going well, keep doing what you're doing and just add it in.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's a perfect segue. Oh, good.
That's it.
Oh, that's great. My friend John has a good question, and some of it you touched on earlier. Uh, Synergistic supplements and therapies with the ZeoCharge, and you sound like me. I mean, we're talking about neurooptimal before we started recording. Behind me, I have in my friend's PEMF machine, Therify, having an interview on this week. You know, hyperbaric CO2 therapy. I'm playing around with CO2 air baths, and I mean, there's countless therapies, right? I mean, we already talked about sauna. But are there ones on top of your list as far as like therapies that you find are super synergistic with ZeoCharge?
I mean, just because ZeoCharge is just going in and binding, like it really could be synergistic with anything. So
Mhm.
anything that, yeah, I think honestly, it's just a great foundation. It doesn't. What I like about it is it doesn't interfere with any other protocols, right? Because it's not a mineral supplement. It's not like
Yep.
a bioavailable mineral. It's not providing nutritional status. It's literally just going in and sopping up stuff, reducing the total stress load. And I think that makes all of the other protocols work better because then the body has more resources to allocate towards, working with the other stuff. What I will say is I do like, I know you sell Shilajit. I love Shilajit as well. So we have a product, it's like a fulvic Shilajit combo. I think Shilajit fulvic like with ZeoCharge is a good 1-2 combo. Just like as a really general baseline, like a generic mineral supplement type of thing. I do like marine phytoplankton too, but all sorts of stuff. I say whatever you want to do, add it
Yeah,
in.
I bought some of your phytoplankton. It's funny. I've been in
Oh, yeah,
the saltwater aquarium reef industry hobby since I lived with my parents. I started in the garage. It was fun, but that's actually what they feed to coral in the
yeah,
saltwater aquarium industry.
yeah. So, yeah, this one is a little different. This ingredients had like an interesting history. It was the first one, the only one registered for human consumption for a long time. All this. It's a wild species of like between 1 and 200 different species of phytoplankton, and
Cool.
it's synthesized in like a bioreactor that
Mhm.
so they take the natural seawater, but then they replicate it in these massive tanks. So it's a purified, controlled environment. So there's no toxicity or anything. But yeah, I like phytoplankton. I think I like a lot of stuff. I like colostrum. There's so much good stuff out there. Um, I don't know. It's whatever people want to do. Whatever is working for their bodies, just add it in there. What I will say about combination, because a lot of people ask, should I take it at the same time or away from things? I like to take the ZeoCharge. If you're doing other detox supplements, let's say you're doing like a cilantro or chlorella or even the shilajit, which has some detox potential. I personally like to take the ZeoCharge at the exact same time because I really don't, and it depends on the protocol, but I kind of like just to get it all done with. Kind of if it's causing stress, like do it once per day.
Yep.
Like get the detox, let the body recover. That's my philosophy. A lot of people have other philosophies. Whatever works for you is great. So I take personally the Shilajit in the evening at the exact same time as the ZeoCharge, but then I'll take like the energizing things like the phytoplankton in the morning. So it kind of depends. If you're taking herbal, like anything natural, like an herbal, even homeopathics, that kind of stuff, it can be taken at the exact same time because the ZeoCharge is not going to bind to those things. But if you're taking synthetics, I say just take them a little bit away, just in case. So like medications and things for sure, I can't really speak to that, but like antibiotics, zeolite is going to bind to antibiotics. So don't take zeolite at the exact same time as an antibiotic if you're on antibiotics, right? So you can space it out throughout the day or that kind of stuff. Other vitamins like magnesium and things you can take at the same time as well. I've never seen an issue. One interesting thing with that is back to the swap and drop. And some people try to use this therapeutically. Like I did this the last 2 nights actually. So I was taking like some nano silver, like whatever that brand, the nano silver stuff.
Mhm.
And whatever, I'm trying to remember the name, but
Is that
nano
sovereign?
silver wasn't the sovereign, not sovereign.
Okay.
Whatever, nano silver.
I
Not
made my own for years, and I always felt better from homemade. But I was very meticulous, even doing it in the dark with the photography light and everything. And
yeah.
yeah,
I've got the colloidal silver generator. I do as well sometimes, but I'm on this nano stuff now. But I've done it with both. So basically, what I've done is taken the silver at the exact same time as the ZeoCharge. Now the ZeoCharge is going to bind to the silver. So, but the philosophy, and someone brought this to my attention a while back, and I was like, I'll give it a try. And I think there was even some research on this at one point. And like zeolite has been studied as a potential delivery mechanism for specific things because of the
oh,
swap stuff. So with silver, the theory would be you take the silver, you mix it with the zeolite water, you have the silver in the cages, and then the silver is as a light metal. So you're still the zeolite's going to prefer the mercury, lead, and the heavier elements, but it would deliver the silver to the site where the mercury or the metal was,
interesting.
or a
Wow,
microbe. So potentially it could like be a delivery system for the silver.
cool,
So anyway, and so
interesting.
that's one thing. So the point of this is if you're taking something that zeolite has some binding capacity to, even if you take it at the same time and it binds to it, it's going to trade it for something more toxic. So you're probably okay either way.
That's pretty
If you're
cool.
concerned, just take it at the opposite side of the day.
um, we'll get through the controversial questions here, and this is asked on every show about every substance, but pregnancy, breastfeeding, and then dosing kids.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm always super careful with pregnancy for one, because, well, for one, with anyone, you just never know how you're going to respond to anything. So even if
Yeah.
there was a ton of clinical research, I still would throw a lot of that out the window because it's just very difficult. Everyone's different. What's going on in your body? Um, I'm not even going to say examples on pregnancy. I just say no comment.
In my mind, it's probably not a good idea to detox while you're creating a child, but I don't know. Maybe it. I know certain things like systemic enzymes. There's some research on that
Yeah,
reducing complications. So
it's.
yeah,
I think so. I think back to the body's innate intelligence. Let's say if you have a lot of circulating toxicity, like you're super toxic, you're super sick when you're pregnant, that's when potentially something should be. If you're super healthy and everything's going well, just don't mess with anything, right? Just let things go. But if you have a lot of issues and you're incredibly toxic and you think that you're transferring that toxicity to the fetus, at that point, still, I don't know. It's that would be the only time maybe even to consider it. But then a thought is maybe the body in its innate intelligence is just naturally, it's just starting to tuck all these metals into fat. It's just tucking them all away because it doesn't want interaction. So then if you start taking a detox agent when you're pregnant, it might stir things up and like start the detox and that's fighting against the body, right? So that's where it's tricky. I mean, I know people who have gone through taking it through the entire pregnancy, but I never recommended it, and I never will, just because I just never will. But
yeah,
I don't know. The answer is I don't know.
yeah.
But what I would say is don't just look at the information online that says zeolite is 100% safe. It can do no harm, because I've seen this a lot when like the nanos and stuff, all these pregnant women taking it because they say, oh, the company says it can't do any harm. It can't mess up my minerals. It can't be stressful. We know that's not true. So just take everything into account.
Imagine breastfeeding would be a little safe.
Yeah, breastfeeding is
Yeah,
a whole new ballgame, because then the concern is, okay, am I transferring
mm-hmm.
toxic elements and dioxins and other things to the baby through the breast milk? And if you are, then okay, taking the zeolite, binding those things, and then there's going to be less being excreted through the breast milk. I mean, is zeolite going through the breast milk? I don't know. So if it's not, then it would probably be an ideal situation,
Mm-hmm.
because then you're not giving zeolite to the child, you're just binding things and excreting them through normal pathways, and then the body's not excreting stuff to the breast milk. Um, yeah, that would definitely be, I'd say, a safer solution. But still, let's say in that scenario, your body is kind of naturally shut off its detox pathways because of the breastfeeding, and your body says, I don't want to be detoxing anything. I'm willing to just take everything coming in and tuck it into fat and deal with it later, right? And then if you start taking a detox supplement, and then maybe the body says, like zeolite or anything else, then the body says, okay, now we're detoxing because we're taking the supplement. And then now you have an increased level of toxicity coming out of tissue into the breast milk, right? So tricky. And then for children, I mean, honestly, I think giving it to children is probably the safest solution. Because, and once again, no clinical studies on children, so we don't market it for children at all. But there are a lot of infants and children that have taken it and do take it and have never had an issue reported. But once again, that doesn't mean it's going to be okay. It's all up to you and decision. But if the child takes it, then it's not like there's going to be an increased output from the mother. There's no concern there at all. It's just going into the child, grabbing some toxicity and leaving. So I mean, if you're concerned about anything, I'd say that might be the best. Maybe both, maybe during breastfeeding, like when you're breastfeeding and giving it to the child, like at the same time, maybe. I don't know. It's a tough one. But for dosing for children, generally I recommend about a teaspoon for every 20 pounds of body weight. So the good news is with children, they're way less sensitive, way less. And I think it's a lot because they don't have the accumulated toxic load for one. They have some, but not like years worth. And they don't have the mental, emotional trauma, stress that I think causes a lot of reactions as well. So
Yep.
basically, any dose you give a child generally is helpful. Like even the nanos and the liquids, the children usually respond well to just because they don't need much at
Yeah.
all. But still,
Yeah.
more is probably going to be way better. Like a lot of people have switched from liquids nanos for the children to the ZeoCharge. It still works way better and it
Mhm.
improves their digestion.
I
Um,
wish I was on it growing up, eating Lucky
me
Charms and Honey
too.
Nut Cheerios.
Yeah,
Who
it's
knows what?
in terms of just for one perspective for dose, just so people understand that like higher doses are okay. And I'm not recommending you take this much, but there's a couple of adult autistic. They're adults now. I think maybe one's 28, one's maybe 20 now. Adults, separate families, and the parents order for them. And they've both been taking it. First, they were taking like initial zeolite product and now like switched to ZeoCharge, one of them. But um, uh, what's the dough? 12 tablespoons, 36 teaspoons, 12 tablespoons. So that's like over 12 scoops a day for every day for 2.5 years. And initially, so with both of these cases, and they both started about the same time, and this was a couple of years ago. So they started on like 2 tablespoons, which is 2 scoops, and they both felt way worse. These are nonverbal, like extreme autism cases, and it increased their rage and made them worse. And they called me, the parents, and I said, okay, let's try doubling the dose. And of course, they were terrified to do so, but they did, and helped a little bit, but still had the rage and the issues. They went to 18 teaspoons, so that's 6 tablespoons, which is 6 scoops, and that's when it made everything better and it controlled the rage. They've both been doing like six 6 scoops, 30 grams twice per day. So they do like the twice per day approach, and they've both been doing that for 2.5 years. And they say it's the only thing that controls the rage. And when they go off of it, the rage comes back. So, and I've recently
Wow.
talked with one of the parents, and I'm wondering, even at that dose, it's like, I think it's just mostly a binding effect. Like there's so much circulating toxicity, internal production of things. I think, because if you take zeolite for 2 years and then you go off of it and you feel worse, people are like, oh, I still have all this toxicity. It's really just because you still have a huge daily dose. And maybe you need to do some sort of, some microbial, maybe there's something going on. It's not like it's, so you're still working on that. So I don't even know. I haven't tested these individuals. They're not my clients. They're just, customers. But
That's funny because we did have a question about autism. You just answered it. So
yeah, it's really, with autism, it's so complex. There's so many various things, but we know there's gut dysfunction. We know there's a lot of toxicity, microbial issues, all the things that are a result of other things. And that's where ZeoCharge can be incredibly helpful just because it goes up and binds to it. It just, I like to say it calms the storm in the body. It just has this calm, especially for autism. It just, a lot of times just calms. Now, some of these individuals I've talked to have taken very low doses because they were scared, or the nanos and liquids, complete disaster, like especially for older individuals. And it just, it's either going to make you better or you're worse type of thing. So it depends. It's not, but for children, a lot of times they even get good results with liquids because they don't need them much. But still, I would never recommend them. But give credit where credit's due.
Jeff, you're a wealth of information. That I already added your product to my website because I love it, I just love the depth of education that you provide on it and all the details. And thanks so much. ZeoliteLabs.com, right?
Yes, that's the site. This education tab has a bunch of videos. There's actually a case studies tab that has a bunch of the case studies that you can look through as well. And that's pretty much the best way to get information. I have technically an Instagram. I just downloaded it on my phone like 2 days ago. So I'm up to that. I think I'm up to 34 followers, not 34,000, 34 followers, but I might start posting. So if anyone wants to follow Zeolite Labs on Instagram, maybe they'll get some content, maybe not, but then you can reach out to me, Jeff at zeolitelabs.com. And I'm happy to answer any questions for anyone.
This was so much fun. Yeah. And you guys can use the code Blackburn to save, I think it's 10%. So
perfect.
Awesome, Jeff. Well, thanks so much. This was awesome. Thanks for everything you do, and stick around as we close out the show.
Thanks for having me.
that was a fascinating conversation. And that story that I shared was not an exaggeration of me traveling at the conference and taking the zeolite. I definitely felt immediately better after drinking a glass of the ZeoCharge. One of my favorite parts of the conversation was when he went down the list of what zeolite binds to besides heavy metals. Like he mentioned, mycotoxins, radioactive materials, histamine, free radicals, ammonia, even BPA, which I had no idea, and lipopolysaccharides, endotoxin. It's such a powerful substance. And I've dabbled over the years with it, the small amounts of powder. And then I played around with the nano stuff the last couple of years and never really felt anything. And I think it was related to just not taking enough, like he was talking about during the show. You have to reach that high enough dose so that you can get an efficient detox. If you're intrigued and want to learn more, definitely go to the website zeolitelabs.com. Check out the education tab. There's a lot of videos there. There's a blog section, case studies, FAQ. I love how much information there is on his website. I am going to get another hair tissue mineral analysis done. So I'll be transparent with my tests before and after and see if my metals came down. I'm also going to try the Oligo scan that he talked about. I'm really interested in that. So be sure to use the discount code Blackburn if you decide to try the ZeoCharge product and you'll save 10%. My website is matt-blackburn.com. You can read about my CLF protocol, which I think is a very gentle and balanced protocol for overall health and living longer. And if you click on the shop tab, you can see all of my recommended products. Recently added ZeoCharge on there, the zeolite, as well as the CO2 body stream from Carbogenetics. I've been fascinated with this carbon dioxide therapy, and I love how affordable it is. If you invest in a hyperbaric oxygen chamber, whether a soft or a hard chamber, it's several tens of thousands of dollars. Whereas this, you're still getting the benefits of oxygen because you need CO2 to utilize oxygen, but it's for a fraction of the price. I mean, just crazy affordable price for what it does. I'm going to have a podcast about it, so stay tuned for that. But I am just blown away at how quickly it relaxes my body and how clear my mind feels after doing a air soak in carbon dioxide gas. So if you want to check that out on the site, it's the CO2 body stream. My company is called Mitolife. You can find that at mitolife.co. We have various different products from really clean shampoo and conditioner, grounding sheets, the best 7-stage under-counter drinking water filter on the market. And then in the wellness tab, you can see all of our various supplements. The PUFA Protect Vitamin E is one of our best sellers, has been for many years, and it's been out of stock for several months. I do have a update that as of this show posting, it should still be back in stock as long as it's not sold out. It's really interesting that when I hear health educators or biohackers referring to fat soluble vitamins, they'll often skip E. They'll say A, D, and K, but they'll skip right over vitamin E. And that's why I call it the forgotten vitamin. I wouldn't say it's the most important. I think they all work together, A, D, E, and K. But if someone has a history like me, veganism, vegetarianism, growing up, didn't like eating a lot of meat or high quality animal foods, I think it is safe to assume that you have had a fat soluble vitamin deficiency for most of your life. And everyone's all about testing, but the fat soluble vitamins are some of the hardest to test for because they're in the tissues. They're not floating around in the blood. So I am curious to see if the oligo scan that Jeff talked about is accurate, because that can actually look at vitamins apparently. I think it is not necessary to test for every supplement that you take, because I think there's some messaging that's getting out like that. I do not agree with that. I've had tremendous health effects from taking various supplements, not knowing what my levels were, and just watching my symptoms decrease and my overall health improve. And vitamin E was a big part of that. Growing up as a mostly European human, I was getting a lot of sunburns, and it took me until my 30s to learn that vitamin E is necessary to protect our skin from UV sun damage. I also look at vitamin E supplementation as a kind of insurance policy with eating out, because I like living my life. I like a burger and occasional French fries. I'd rather live life to the fullest and not live in a bubble. I think supplementation can help mitigate all of that stuff that we want to enjoy with life. So again, that product is called PUFA Protect. We have several on there. Vitamin K2 is another really powerful fat soluble vitamin. And we have the Purely K, which is just K2 by itself, because often it's mixed with D3, vitamin D, or it's mixed with a whole bunch of other stuff. And I'm not a fan of combination supplements with a whole lot of different things in it, because that could really throw people out of balance. That's why a lot of the Mitolife supplements are simple, so you can adjust the dosage up or down, and you don't have to worry about having a negative reaction from having 10, 15 ingredients in the product. Check out the Mitolife Academy. That's on YouTube. It's $15 a month. You get 2 private videos every month, my latest research, experiments, and then a live Q&A the last day of every month. So that is a wrap. I'll see you guys on next Friday's show. Stay supercharged.